The stars of the Milky Way burned quietly above the great halls of the Galactic Council. It was a place where thousands of alien races met to speak of peace and power and trade. Once the humans had a seat there, but now their seat stood empty. Many in the council said Earth had fallen long ago. They said the humans were gone after the war with the Dominion fleets. They called it the end of the human story. Few remembered how long humanity had stood against impossible odds. Few remembered that humans never gave up until their last breath. They saw the empty seat and thought it was silence. They did not know it was waiting. Far from the shining worlds of the council, a small outpost drifted near the edge of a dying star. It was called Haven 12, and it was built by human hands before the fall. Only a few people lived there now. Among them was a man named Jack Carter, who had once been an officer in the United Earth Defense Force. He had seen the war and the fires that took half the colonies. He had watched the council send no help and give no warning. He had watched Earth go dark. For years he stayed quiet, working as a mechanic and keeping to himself. But when a transmission came from the core system speaking about the council declaring humanity dead, something inside him refused to stay quiet. He went to the control deck and turned on the old communication relay. The machine was ancient and scratched, but it still worked. He spoke slowly, but every word carried a weight. He said to any human who could still hear him that the galaxy believed Earth was gone, but we are still here. He said we will not vanish. He said the council forgot who we are, so we will remind them. The words echoed through the void of space. They reached forgotten stations and sleeping ships. People who thought they were alone felt hope again. On a mining world called Delta 9, a woman named Laura Bennett heard the message while fixing a power line. She was once a captain before the war ended. When she heard the voice of Jack, she dropped her tools and looked at the stars. She told her crew that humanity was not finished. The people around her laughed at first, but when she replayed the message, their laughter died. Something stirred in their hearts that had been sleeping for years. They started talking about rebuilding the ships that had been buried in the dust. They began cleaning the hangars. Days turned into weeks. More and more human signals appeared. Colonies that were silent began to speak. Old codes of the fleet came alive. Jack Carter gathered the data and created a hidden network. They called it the Line. The Line was made of people who refused to fade away. Engineers and pilots and farmers and scientists all joined. They worked in secret. They sent parts and plans. They used what little they had. The old Earth flag appeared again on the hulls of ships that were not yet ready to fly. Laura Bennett left Delta 9 and took command of a small freighter named Horizon Dawn. It was slow and broken, but it flew. She went to Haven 12 and met Jack for the first time. He was older than she imagined, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at her and said, "We do not have much, but we have enough." She smiled and said, "Enough is all we ever needed." Together they formed the first human fleet since the fall. It was small, but it was real. The fleet hid among asteroid belts and dead moons. They trained again. They learned how to move without being seen. They remembered the old codes of battle. Every time someone grew tired, Jack reminded them of what Earth had been. He spoke about oceans and forests and skies that once held birds instead of ash. He said, "We fight not for revenge, but for memory. We fight so our children will know who we were." Meanwhile, the Galactic Council continued their meetings. They spoke of new trade routes and border disputes. No one mentioned Earth anymore. To them, humanity was a name in old records. But a few ambassadors had begun to hear strange rumors. They heard of small fleets moving in the dark. They heard of colonies that were supposed to be empty, showing signs of life. The council dismissed these as ghost stories. No one believed that humans could come back from extinction. One day, a patrol from the Dominion found an abandoned station near the outer rim. They sent a scout team inside. They found the walls marked with symbols of Earth. On one wall, written in bold letters, were the words, "We are not gone." The scout captain sent the report back to the council. The news spread fast, but most laughed it off. They said it was the work of raiders or pirates, but deep inside some of them felt a chill. Jack Carter stood on the bridge of the Horizon Dawn looking at the stars on the screen. He said to Laura that they will not believe until they see. She said, "Then we will show them." The fleet had grown to 12 ships. Each one was built from scraps and dreams. They had little fuel and few weapons, but they had something stronger. They had purpose. Every person aboard those ships carried the same thought that humanity will not die quietly. When the first ship took flight toward the core systems, Jack stood by the window. He remembered the day the council turned their back on Earth. He remembered the flames of New York and the silence after. He whispered to himself that we will remind them of who we are. Laura came beside him and said, "We are the children of storms and we do not kneel." The engines roared and the horizon dawn moved into the black. The stars seemed to shine brighter as if they too were watching. Messages came from far and wide. More humans joined the line. Some came from frozen colonies where survival was a daily battle. Some came from hidden moons where families had waited in secret. Each story added another flame to the growing fire. The Council's networks began to notice the activity, but by then it was too late to stop it. The humans were already awake. As the fleet traveled across the empty sectors, they found the wreckage of old human ships. They stopped to collect data and pay silent respect. Jack told the crew that every ship we pass is a promise. We will not let their fight be forgotten. The crew nodded and continued. The journey was long and cold, but no one gave up. They sang the old songs of Earth to keep their spirits alive. When they finally reached the edge of the Council's space, Jack sent a message through every channel. He said, "This is the voice of Earth. You thought we were gone, but we are still here. You forgot our strength, but we remember. We are coming home." The message from Jack Carter echoed across the galaxy and reached the ears of the Galactic Council. At first they thought it was a trick. Some said it was a pirate using the name of Earth to scare the trade routes. Others said it was an old signal replayed from forgotten relays. But there were a few who remembered what humanity was like. The elder of the Karen species spoke softly and said, "If the humans are truly awake again, then the stars will not be calm for long." No one listened to him. The younger delegates laughed and said humans were history. But far away the human fleet kept moving, and the laughter of the council could not reach them. On the bridge of the Horizon Dawn, the screens showed lines of coordinates glowing blue. Jack Carter stood beside Laura Bennett and looked at the stars ahead. Every mark on the map was a place where a human signal had appeared. Some were weak and broken, but they were real. Jack said, "Every signal is a promise that we are not done yet." Laura nodded and said, "The galaxy will hear us soon." The crew around them worked in silence. They were tired, but their eyes carried something fierce. They were no longer survivors hiding in shadows. They were soldiers of a memory that refused to die. They reached the system of Varen, where the Dominion kept one of their supply outposts. The Dominion had been the first to attack Earth long ago, and now their banners flew over dozens of worlds. Jack looked at the readings and said, "We will take back what they stole." Laura said, "We cannot win a full war yet, but we can remind them of who we are." They planned in silence. The plan was simple because simple plans did not fail easily. They would strike the outpost, take what they needed, and leave before the main fleet arrived. When night fell over Varen, the human ships moved like ghosts. The stars hid them as if the universe itself wanted them unseen. They approached the Dominion outpost and turned off all external lights. The ships glided over the surface and stopped above the main dock. Laura gave the signal and the first human Marines entered the base. The Dominion guards never saw them coming. Within minutes, the control room was taken. For the first time in years, the flag of Earth was raised over a captured alien stronghold. Jack stood on the ground of the outpost and looked at the human symbol waving above. He said quietly, "This is just the beginning." They gathered fuel weapons and supplies and left as fast as they came. The Dominion fleet arrived hours later and found only ruins. The Council received the report and finally began to worry. The message said human symbols found on Varen Station. The room went silent. The elder of the Karen repeated his warning. "The humans are not ghosts. They are the fire that refuses to die." While the Council argued, the humans kept building. More ships joined the line. Hidden factories came alive. Old data from Earth's archives was used to rebuild the technology they had lost. Laura spent her nights in the engineering bay, fixing power cores and reprogramming defense grids. She said, "Every spark is a step toward our return." Jack visited every ship and spoke with every crew. He told them the story of Earth not as a tragedy, but as a promise. He said, "We are the children of a world that survived everything that tried to end it." Soon they had 20 ships and 3 mobile bases. They named the network the Dawn Fleet. They stayed hidden near the edge of a nebula where scanners could not find them. Every day they trained. They learned how to fight as one again. When the younger pilots grew afraid, Laura told them about the battles of Mars and Titan, and how humans had fought even when their skies burned. Her voice carried calm strength that made others believe. Jack watched her speak and thought that maybe this was what leadership truly was, not power, but faith. News began to spread through the outer systems. Some alien merchants whispered that human fleets were moving again. Some said they saw the flag of Earth painted on asteroid bases. The council tried to stop the rumors, but rumors travel faster than truth. Young species who had never seen a human began to ask who they were. The older ones answered quietly that humans were a race that had once fought the universe and almost won. One evening, Jack stood by the observation deck and looked at the nebula lights painting the ship walls in blue and gold. He thought of Earth again. He thought of the oceans and the winds that once touched his face. He thought of the people he lost and the promises he made. Laura came beside him and said, "We are almost ready." He asked her what she meant. She said, "We have ships, we have will, and we have a reason. That is more than most empires ever had." Jack smiled and said, "Then it is time to remind them." The next day, the Dawn Fleet sent messages across human channels. They said the first strike was over, and the second begins. They targeted another Dominion base closer to Council space. This time they would not hide. They wanted the galaxy to see. When their ships arrived, the Dominion Defense Forces rushed to meet them. Plasma fire lit the dark. The humans fought with old weapons but precise aim. Every move was planned. Laura commanded the Horizon Dawn with calm focus while Jack led the assault teams on the surface. The battle lasted hours. When the dust cleared, the Dominion ships were burning. The humans broadcast one message to every open frequency. It said, "We are the people of Earth, we remember." The transmission reached the council chambers in the middle of their meeting. The sound of a human voice filled the hall after decades of silence. Every delegate froze. The elder of the Karen closed his eyes and said, "They have returned." The Dominion representative shouted for war, but others stayed quiet. They all knew what it meant. Humanity was back and they would not be forgotten again. Far from the council, the Dawn Fleet retreated to the nebula once more. The ships were damaged, but the spirits were high. People cheered and sang songs from Earth's old languages. Jack stood on the deck and listened. He said to Laura, "They heard us now." She nodded and said, "Yes, but they will come for us soon." Jack answered, "Then let them come, because the galaxy forgot humanity's might, and it is time we remind them again." The stars burned brighter as if they agreed. The stars above the nebula shimmered softly as the Dawn Fleet drifted in the quiet of space. The crews repaired their ships and counted the losses from the last battle. Some were wounded and some were gone, but no one spoke of surrender. Jack Carter moved through the corridors of the Horizon Dawn and greeted every person he passed. He spoke few words, but his presence reminded them why they fought. Laura Bennett sat at the main console checking power levels and weapon systems. The ship was tired but alive. They had survived 2 battles against stronger enemies, and that meant something. The galaxy now spoke of humans again. The news spread across space like wildfire. Traders and wanderers carried stories of human fleets striking Dominion posts and vanishing like shadows. Some said the humans were ghosts, and some said they were demons born of stars. The Galactic Council held meeting after meeting, but no one could agree what to do. The Dominion demanded that the Council declare humanity an enemy of peace. The elder of the Karen said peace is not kept by fear. His voice was ignored again. The Council prepared defenses, but deep inside they were afraid. The Horizon Dawn. Laura received a signal from an old human colony called Meridian 3. The colony had been lost during the war and no one had heard from it since. The message was weak and filled with static, but one line was clear. It said, "We are alive and we remember Earth." Jack listened and felt hope bloom again. He said to Laura, "We cannot leave them there." She said, "If we go, the Dominion will follow," but Jack answered, "Then let them follow, because humanity never leaves its own behind." The Dawn Fleet changed course and moved toward Meridian 3. The journey took many days through cold and empty space. Along the way, they passed broken satellites and the remains of old battles. Each wreck they saw was a reminder of what they had lost. The crews stayed quiet as they watched the debris drift by. Jack stood by the window each night and looked at the stars. He thought of the people waiting on that distant world and wondered what they had endured. When they reached Meridian 3, they found a planet scarred by war but still turning under a red sun. The colony domes were cracked, but light still burned inside. As the fleet approached, they received another message. It said, "We knew you would come." Laura smiled and said they never stopped believing. The ships landed near the main dome and the air was thin but breathable. Jack stepped onto the ground and felt the dust cling to his boots. He saw faces of people who had lived through years of darkness. They were thin and worn, but their eyes shone bright. A woman named Ellen Price led the colony. She greeted Jack with tears in her eyes. She said we thought Earth forgot us. Jack said Earth was hurt but not gone. He told her about the Dawn Fleet and the rising of the line. She listened in silence, then said, "We will join you." The colony still had old mining ships that could be rebuilt. Engineers began working at once. Children ran between the machines laughing for the first time in years. Hope had returned to a world that was supposed to be dead. The Dominion discovered the movement soon. Their scouts found traces of human ships near Meridian 3. A fleet was sent to investigate. The Dawn Fleet detected them before they arrived. Jack called all captains to a meeting. He said, "We will not run this time. We will stand and show them what it means to fight humans on their own ground." Laura agreed and said the people of Meridian deserve to see that they are not alone. The order went out and every ship prepared for battle. When the Dominion fleet appeared, their commander sent a message demanding surrender. Jack replied with calm words. He said, "We are the people of Earth and we do not bow." The battle began. Missiles and plasma fire filled the sky above the red planet. The ground shook as explosions lit the horizon. Laura guided the Horizon Dawn between enemy ships and fired with precision. Smaller human ships darted in and out of enemy lines like hunters in a storm. Every time a human ship fell, another rose to take its place. The colonists on the ground watched and cheered. Ellen Price led ground defenses using whatever weapons they had. She stood on top of a wall shouting orders and refused to hide. Jack landed his shuttle near her and joined the fight. Together they pushed back the enemy troops that tried to land. The air burned with smoke and dust, but they did not stop. When the last Dominion ship retreated into space, the humans stood surrounded by wreckage and silence. Then a cheer rose from every voice. They had won. Jack looked at the sky filled with debris and fire. He said, "They will come again with more ships, but today we showed them what Earth means." Laura contacted him from orbit and said the Council will know by now. Jack answered good, because they need to remember. The humans gathered their wounded and rebuilt what they could. The colonists joined the fleet and the Dawn Fleet grew larger. Back in the council chambers, the news arrived. The Dominion demanded full war, but many races hesitated. They remembered the ancient stories of human wars. They remembered that when humanity fought, it was not for conquest, but for survival. The elder of the Cairn spoke again and said they forgot the humans once and paid the price, and if they forget again, they will pay more. The room fell silent. Weeks passed. The Dawn Fleet continued to move and grow. They liberated 2 more colonies and built hidden stations in asteroid fields. Every success brought more people to their cause. Jack became a symbol of hope. Laura became the heart of the fleet. Together they led not with orders but with example. At night they sat by the viewing port and spoke of Earth. They wondered if the old planet still turned under its clouded sky. Jack said, "One day we will see it again." Laura said, "When that day comes, the galaxy will watch." The fleet prepared for the next move. They knew the Council would not stay silent much longer. Rumors said the Dominion was gathering allies to crush the humans once and for all, but the humans were ready. They had rebuilt their spirit. They had remembered who they were, and in every ship and every heart burned the same thought that the galaxy forgot humanity's might, and that it was time to remind them again. The stars were quiet again, and for a time it seemed as if the galaxy had found peace, but silence can be deceiving, and peace that grows from fear is fragile. The Galactic Empire was no longer the same. It had changed after the humans came. It had opened its borders and allowed new voices to rise, and for the first time in its long history, the people began to think freely. Yet deep inside the halls of power, some old lords still whispered about revenge. They could not forget the shame of bowing to humans, and they dreamed of finding a way to stand above them again. They called themselves the Eternal Circle, and they worked in secret building machines and studying what little they understood of human power. But all they created was corruption. Because they did not seek peace, they sought control. Captain Laura, King knew something like this would happen. She had seen it before in humanity's own history. How pride always tries to return even after peace has been given. The horizon now watched over the outer borders of what was once the Empire. Laura stood on her bridge as the stars shimmered around her, and her crew spoke softly while scanning for disturbances. Daniel Hayes came to her side and said there are rumors of strange energy readings near the old Imperial worlds. Laura nodded and said, "Send a team to investigate, but be gentle with them. They are afraid and fear makes them reckless." Far away on a dark planet, the Eternal Circle had begun a new experiment. They had found fragments of data left from the day their fleets vanished, and they believed they could rebuild the same force that humans had used to erase them. They did not understand that it was not a weapon but a control of energy, born from harmony, not dominance. The machines they built screamed with power they could not contain. A young scientist named Alara watched the readings rise and shouted that the system was unstable, but the lords ignored her. They believed that if they could open the same door humans use, they would claim the same godlike strength. What they opened instead was a wound in space. The sky above the planet cracked like glass, and something vast and hungry stirred within the void. When the horizon detected the anomaly, Laura felt the vibration through her ship before the sensors even confirmed it. The readings were wrong, they were growing too fast, spreading like wildfire across the nearby systems. She ordered full focus on the source, and when the images appeared on the main screen, the crew fell silent. The planet below was collapsing into itself, its oceans lifting upward, its mountains turning into dust as a black sphere grew from its heart. Daniel looked at her and said, "What have they done?" And Laura answered, "They have tried to steal what they could not understand." She gave the order to move in, but carefully. They could not attack or destroy, or they would make it worse. When the horizon arrived in orbit, the energy waves struck the hull with the force of a storm, but the human ship held steady. Laura ordered the communication channels open. She called to the planet below, saying, "Stop your machines, you are tearing space apart," but no one answered. The surface was chaos and fire. Alara, the young scientist, managed to escape to a small transmitter station and sent one final signal. She said, "We tried to control it, but it is alive, it is consuming everything." Then her voice was gone, and the planet began to fade from existence, leaving behind only the dark sphere growing larger by the second. The humans understood that if they did not act, the entire sector would vanish. Laura gathered her mind and connected with the other captains of the fleet through the mental link that humans had developed in their evolution. They did not speak with words but with thought. Together they reached out with their energy to seal the wound. The light from their ship spread like wings around the black sphere. The energy screamed and pushed against them. It wanted to consume them too. Laura felt pain burn through her, but she did not stop. She remembered Earth, she remembered the promise that no world should suffer what they had once suffered. She whispered, "Hold on, we can do this." On the nearby worlds, the people looked up and saw the sky turn white. They saw human ships standing like stars against the darkness, and then light poured across the heavens, washing away the shadow. When it was over, the wound in space was gone, but so was the planet, and part of the horizon's outer systems had melted from the strain. Inside the ship, silence returned. The crew breathed slowly, recovering from the immense energy drain. Daniel looked at Laura, his face pale, and said, "We saved them, but at what cost?" Laura looked out at the fading light and said, "At the cost of reminding them again that power is never to be stolen. It must be earned." After the event, messages poured in from across the former empire. The people thanked the humans but also feared them more than ever. Some said the humans had unleashed the darkness on purpose to test them. Others said they had saved creation itself. Laura ignored the words of praise and fear alike. She cared only that life had survived. She ordered the fleet to stand down and rest. Humanity did not need worship. It only needed purpose. The emperor who had once knelt before Laura was now an old man. He heard of the disaster and of the human sacrifice that stopped it. He called for his council and said, "The humans have again done what we could not. They have saved us even from ourselves." Miratelin, now older too, said, "Perhaps now you understand what true strength is." The emperor nodded slowly. He looked at the stars beyond his window and said, "They are no longer gods to me, they are our teachers." Days later, a small human shuttle landed on the capital world. Laura herself came to meet the emperor one last time. They walked together in the palace garden under the silver trees. The emperor said, "We have lost much, but perhaps we have gained wisdom." Laura smiled gently and said, "Wisdom is never lost when hearts are willing to change." He asked her, "Will humans ever rule us?" And she answered, "No, because ruling others is not our destiny. We only guide when needed, and then we move on." That evening, as Laura returned to her ship, she looked at the horizon of the alien world glowing beneath two suns. She felt a quiet peace inside her for the first time in many years. Humanity had crossed the edge of fear and found meaning in compassion. As the horizon lifted off the ground, the people below watched in silence. Some bowed, some cried, some simply watched with wonder. The ship rose higher until it became a single star moving into the distance. In the deep of space, Laura sat alone for a moment on the bridge. The stars surrounded her and the universe seemed endless again. She thought of Earth, of her family, of the faces of those she had saved and those she could not. She felt both sorrow and pride and whispered to herself, "We are what we choose to be, not what power makes us." Then she closed her eyes and listened to the hum of the ship like the heartbeat of creation itself. Humanity had once been afraid of the dark, now the dark was afraid of them, but they carried no hate for it, only light. Years passed and the galaxy began to heal from the scars left by fear and war. The once great galactic empire was now a council of many voices where no one world ruled another, and among those voices the humans sat quietly, never asking for power or reward. They had returned to their ships and their stars, but their presence was still felt like a silent promise that peace would not be broken again. Captain Laura King still commanded the horizon, though her hair had turned silver and her eyes had grown softer with time. She no longer saw herself as a soldier, but as a guardian who watched over a fragile peace made by blood and tears. The new generation of aliens who had been born after the wars saw humans differently. To them, humans were not monsters or gods, but protectors who stood between them and the chaos of the void. Yet some among them still wondered how far that protection could go. On a small border world named Rithen, a group of explorers had discovered something strange buried deep under the ground. It was a machine older than the Empire itself, built by a forgotten race that had lived before any known star nations. The machine pulsed with a strange rhythm like a sleeping heart, and when it woke, the world changed. The explorers had no idea that the machine was part of an ancient weapon built to reshape galaxies. It had been sealed away long before humanity ever rose on Earth. The pulse that came from it spread across the stars faster than light. Ships lost contact and strange storms of energy began to appear. The Galactic Council sent distress calls, but even they did not understand what was happening. The only ones who recognized the pattern were the humans, because the rhythm in the signal was the same one they had found in their own DNA long ago, a rhythm that had always set them apart. When Laura heard the signal, she felt a chill that went through her bones. She stood on the bridge of the horizon and listened to the faint sound echoing through the systems like a heartbeat calling her name. Daniel Hayes, now a fleet commander, appeared on her screen and said, "It is happening again. Something older than us has awakened." Laura nodded and said, "Gather the fleet. We will not wait for it to come to us. We go to it." As the human fleet moved through space, thousands of alien worlds watched their approach with both fear and hope. They remembered what had happened before, how the humans had stopped the black sphere that nearly consumed creation, and they prayed that this time would end the same. When the fleet arrived at Rythen, the sky above the planet was already torn open. Light poured out like rivers of fire, and the air shimmered as if reality itself was bending. The ancient machine stood in the center of a crater glowing brighter than the sun. Laura ordered her ship closer. Inside the machine a voice spoke, but it was not words, it was thought pure and deep, older than time itself. It said, "You who carry the fire within you, you have come at last." Laura did not answer with her mouth, she answered with her mind, asking, "What are you?" The voice said, "We are the builders. We shaped this galaxy. When it was young, we gave life to many worlds, and we placed a spark in one of them to see if it would grow. You are that spark." Humanity was silent as they listened. The voice continued, saying, "The spark has grown strong, but it burns too bright, and soon it will consume all things. You must choose to end the fire or to guide it, or the galaxy will not survive." Laura felt the weight of the words. She understood now that humanity had never been a mistake nor an accident. They were made to be the balance between creation and destruction. Daniel called out, saying, "The energy is rising. It will collapse everything if we do not act." Laura closed her eyes and reached out with her mind to every human ship and every human soul. She said, "Remember what makes us human, not power, not fear, but hope." Together they formed a single thought and sent it into the machine. The light from the planet exploded outward, turning the void into gold. Every being in the galaxy saw it. On their worlds they looked up and saw a light brighter than any star, yet soft like the dawn. The pulse of it touched them, and for a moment they felt calm, as if the universe itself had taken a deep breath. When the light faded, the storms were gone and the signal had stopped. The machine had vanished, and with it the danger, but also the humans were gone. The entire human fleet disappeared from the sensors, leaving behind only silence. Weeks turned to months, and the Galactic Council searched for them but found nothing. Many said the humans had ascended to another plane, that they had become one with the builders who created them. Others said they had simply gone home beyond the edge of the stars. The Emperor, now old and frail, stood on the balcony of his palace and looked at the sky, saying they were never gods. Yet they became more than any god we ever knew. Miratellen whispered, "Maybe that is what it means to be human." Then one day a signal came. It was soft and simple, and it came from deep space beyond any known map. It said, "We are still watching." The message carried no threat, only comfort, and when the council heard it, they felt tears in their eyes. The Emperor smiled faintly and said, "Then we are not alone." Far beyond the rim of the galaxy, the horizon floated near a new star that no one had ever seen before. Laura stood by the window looking at it. Daniel was beside her, his uniform torn and his face tired, but there was peace in his eyes. He asked her, "What do we do now?" Laura smiled and said, "We build." She looked out at the endless darkness and said, "Maybe it is time we stop fighting and start creating again." The crew agreed, and for the first time humanity began not as soldiers or saviors, but as wanderers and teachers of light. In time, their legend would fade and turn into myth. Children of alien worlds would hear stories of humans who once walked among stars, who stood against gods and darkness, and never bowed. They would look at the night sky and wonder if those humans were still out there and somewhere. In the deep beyond the stars, the horizon would pass by unseen, carrying the last of the old crew toward a new dawn. Laura sat quietly in her chair and thought of Earth. She remembered the oceans, the wind, the laughter of her family long gone. She whispered, "We came so far, we did what we had to, and maybe that is enough." The stars outside shimmered like diamonds in water, and she closed her eyes, feeling the hum of her ship, the same hum that once carried her through wars and storms. Humanity had changed the galaxy, but they had also changed themselves. They no longer needed to prove their might because they had become what they were meant to be, the light that guides others. And in that quiet, infinite sky where no sound could travel, the voice of Laura King whispered one last time before fading into the vastness, saying, "We are human and we remember."